Okay, so an update on my latest upcycling project, and the glass of wine is in the shot because I always think that upcycled rug making goes hand in hand with drinking a good wine. So let me just take a sip. Okay, so to start, this is my very first experiment. Some of you might have seen me posting the pictures of it on the upcycling group. Basically, it's a piece of woven, it looks like almost like a mohair wool, if you will, that I have woven together. But what it actually is bits of fabric pieces that I've turned into fiber and then made a whole new wool out of. So I've started with lots of scrap fabrics like this, as you can see. So I take the larger pieces and I usually make woven rugs out of them, or there's another type of rug where I just stitch scraps together. So this is really the thinnest of the thinnest and the smallest of the small scraps that I have no use for, that I can't do much with. And I have more than enough dog beds and cat pillows and decorative pillows stuffed with the stuff, and I really don't need to make any more pillows. So what I do with these scraps is I take them and my handy fabric scissors, and then I cut them into small pieces. Now when I first did this process, I actually took brushes. So what I originally did was I got these brushes, which are actually dog brushes. It's very similar to the type of brushes you use when you're dealing with fibers for either yarn or felt making. So I took the brushes and I cut the fabric up and I brushed it out into fibers, which works really well. By all means, it works really, really well. The only problem is it takes a very, very long time. So I've sort of borrowed from a lot of people's books and a lot of people's pages, and I've watched many, many videos, and yes, this process worked, but it took very long, and the next day my hands were actually quite sore and they hurt a lot because it's a lot of physical labor sitting and brushing out your scraps until they form fibers like this. It takes a very long time, and a piece like this would actually take me at least a full day's worth of work just to create something this small. So I figured there had to be another method other than using brushes to brush out the scraps. So what I did then was, after cutting up the scraps into small pieces, and they're like literally small, tiny pieces, they're probably 1/8 of an inch, if not smaller, or that's 5 millimeters. So just really, really, really small pieces. And then I took an idea from a completely different form of upcycling, and that wasn't the felt or the fleece making. I took it out of the paper making. So what I did was I took these scraps and I put them in my blender with some water, and then I just blended it until all the fibers broke up, which worked out a hell of a lot quicker. It took a few seconds rather than hours to turn everything into fibers. And I didn't end up with little things like this, which is the tiny brush bristles, which actually break off and become fragile after a few hours of brushing back and forth. So here is an example of what I was left with after brushing. So this is the type of fiber. I could have brushed it for a few more hours, but this was probably a good hour's worth of work, and this is the fiber that I came up with. But then when I went to using the blender, this was the fiber I came up with within a few seconds. As you can see, this has actually got fewer chunky pieces and it's much finer. So this is what I used just after a few seconds in the blender. I initially counted up to 30 seconds, so 30 to 40 seconds. You can leave it up to a minute, and it replaces a much longer time of sitting with the brushes and trying to brush your fibers separate. Okay, so that was the first step. I managed to get the fibers done. My next problem was figuring out how to create a yarn from the fibers. So I had my source material, which I managed to successfully turn into fiber. But now then, how do I take this and turn this into a yarn? Now with normal yarn, it's fairly simple. The strands are quite long, so you can just sort of, when I talk about normal, I'm talking about like a shop bought fiber that you get, a natural fiber. The fibers are very long, and this is where I sort of came up with certain problems. So with a recycled fiber like this, the fibers are incredibly short. I did try versions where I cut longer pieces of material, but to be quite honest, they actually seem to bind a lot worse than the smaller pieces. So that's why they are these much smaller pieces, because they seem to work much better than the larger pieces. Even if you look at very closely at my sample, you'll see the sections where there are larger pieces and smaller pieces, and the smaller pieces actually look better bound than the compressed. So I took this and I wetted a little. So here is a version where I've put it in the blender and it's still a bit wet. Okay, so I took it and I just rubbed it in my hands, and I joined it and I rubbed it in my hands until I had little pieces like this, and I made as long threads as possible, just binding it all together until I had long pieces. And this is after a while of rubbing it like this. So what it does is it kind of creates a type of felt, so you get a felt yarn, and it's this type of felt yarn that I used to actually eventually to create this. Okay, so it's a felt yarn. So basically it's a very small piece of fiber that I've just joined together. Okay, and I've used these, and then I have actually woven them to create this. Now the problem with the process that I used so far is, even though I've managed to successfully create a fiber that I can work with, and I have been able to weave a certain amount, if I pull on this hard enough, it actually just comes apart. So my ideal is to be able to make a mat or a carpet out of this, which is very difficult. If given a good washing or a good cleaning, it's quite literally just going to fall apart and come apart. So that's really no good. I don't want to have something that's just going to come apart. So the next solution was how to figure out to make sure that this felt yarn does not come apart. And the only real solution is that you twist it. So it has to be twisted, or you have to be able to spin it and spin it into a tight little yarn. And you can see I'm really pulling on that, and it's not coming apart. And I've just twisted this little bit, and it's not coming apart. If I take it normally with the process I did before, which is just rubbing it together to create the yarn, I pulled on it, it would come apart. But however, if I take that exact same thing, go through the same process, but then I twist it and twist it and twist it and twist it, okay, and I pull, and I can pull, you can see it's not going to come apart. Really, it's not going to come apart. So great. So I know that the next thing I need to do is learn to take my new yarn that I create and create long pieces of it and then twist it. Okay? My problem with this is, and perhaps someone out there in the community can help me with an answer, and I've been trying to find an answer as much as possible. I even found I was thinking of using a spindle, and I found a fantastic instruction on the instructables.com on how to create a spindle out of chopsticks, which is a wonderful idea. However, my problem is my basic fiber is not long enough for me to be able to weave it like I would a normal fiber into a yarn using a drop spindle. So my biggest challenge right now is trying to find out how to make it all join together long enough for me to be able to spin it into a usable thread, and that really is my challenge. So I can sit, and then I've used both dry, wet and semi-wet thread, and I can create usually up to about 15 centimeters or 6 inches in length, a good piece of wound yarn. But then I really struggle to add on to the length after that. Not for any other reason, but the fibers are really short. So if there's a way that I can spin the short fiber into a usable yarn, that would be fantastic, where I can't use the methods I've been using previously because it comes undone, and I don't want to use, for example, an existing fiber and blend it. I don't want to create a blend. I want to be able to create a yarn that is completely out of my recycled fiber. So I will keep on looking into the matter, but if anyone has any suggestions, I am completely open to them, other than just using my fingers to twist it as much as possible. But even doing this, after a while, I just found I can't, the length is too much. How do I spin these very small fibers into one really long ball of yarn? So I will keep looking into that and seeing if I can't find a way. If you know any way that can help, please feel free to share it with me in the comment section below. Thank you.